Uncle Vinny, the EMT. Although I've heard many stories from my uncle about his time as an EMT, this is the story that will stick with me until I die. About 6 years ago, my Uncle Vinny's paramedic crew responded to a call from a hotel in Philly, and it was one of the more horrific experiences he's had. The initial report stated that a maintenance man named Mike went to check on room 417 since water had been reported flooding into the hallway, and it was he who found the body. Mike informed 911 that there was a man in the in-suit hot tub who appeared to be deceased, and he was all but hyperventilating as he tried to make his report. Mike relayed that he saw the man and immediately backed out of the room, being careful not to drop his phone into the several inches of water on the floor. My uncle's two-man paramedic team entered the room about 12 minutes later, and they almost gagged at the smell of feces and burning flesh. Vinny, who has a stomach of steel, had to press his hand to his mouth to keep from vomiting. The room was filled with steam, and the humidity was instantly making the men sweat profusely. Their grip on their equipment was slipping, and they knew they needed to extract the victim quickly. The naked man was floating in the hot tub, a maniacal grin plastered across his face. From the looks of it, the man had been in the water for a while, since his bruised skin was starting to peel off of his body in long, squishy strips. Vinny held his breath and checked for vitals, while one of the other EMTs went to get a bag for the body. Even though my uncle saw corpses regularly, this method of death was a disturbing first for him, and something about the whole situation was unnerving. As Vinny placed his fingers on the man's wrist, expecting to feel nothing, he had to choke back a startled scream when the victim's hand shot out and grasped his arm. It wasn't a corpse. The John Doe didn't show any other signs of being responsive, but when the other EMT went to check the man's eyes for a dilation reaction, his pupils looked slitted, almost like those of a reptile. Vinny was weirded out, but dismissed it as a side effect of getting boiled alive like a hard-boiled egg. As the men removed the victim from the hot tub, the man began to thrash, strips of flesh splattering on the EMTs. They tried to pin the man down to keep him from hurting himself, but he was shockingly strong. As the last bits of flesh dropped to the floor, Vinny saw that it wasn't more skin underneath, it was scales. His partner must have noticed too, because both men began screaming almost in unison. The thing began to growl, and my uncle's normal desire to figure out problems turned into sheer fight-or-flight response, with flight winning out. He ran from the hotel room, his teammate on his heels. They slammed the door behind them, and a moment later, they heard one of the windows shatter. The men had no idea how to explain to their boss what happened, but after some phone calls and a few men in black suits appearing, they were given a specific story to follow. They were told to say that a John Doe tried to drown himself, and that the mentally unhinged man climbed down the fire escape when his attempt failed. Vinny, who was paid extra well to keep his mouth shut, never did tell anyone about his story until he shared it with me the other day. I could tell he didn't want to, but I was the only one in the family that he thought would believe him. The only reason he even shared his ridiculous story is because he thinks something has been stalking him the last few weeks, and he's worried that the creature has returned. I thought he was crazy, until I went to his house yesterday and saw a trail of bipedal, clawed footprints underneath his windowsill. Now my uncle is missing, and I think I'm the only one that really knows what happened to him. I've been an EMT for a while now, and I've seen my share of strange things. Here are some of my experiences. As the title states, I started my career as an EMT some years ago. I love my job. It's gross some days, funny other days, and tragic on several days, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. There are, though, some days that have stuck with me. Not because of the trauma or the grief or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, I have several of those days, but those stories are for another time. These are the days that got downright creepy. Days that I remember because I can't really explain what happened. The days that keep me awake if I think too hard about them, trying to wrap my mind around events I can't really understand. My therapist actually suggested writing my stories down and talking about them, so I figured why not kill two birds with one stone and share some of them here. At the very least, it may help me sleep, despite this sub's name. We'll just do these one at a time then, if you kind readers will have me. This is the story of the time a patient followed me home. Names and locations have changed, obviously, because I don't want to be eaten by the HIPAA monster. It was an average day, and by average, I mean balls to the wall busy. If you've ever worked EMS in an overworked, understaffed system, you'll know what I mean. Dropping off patients at the hospital with 15+ calls pending and no trucks available, shoving cold spaghetti down your throat because you're too busy to eat, that kind of day. We had just dropped off our millionth nursing home patient. Lovely woman, broken hip, had a lot of good stories when the call came out. Cardiac arrest, high priority response. I work for the county agency, so we're a little all over with our calls. The CAD notes stated that this was a houseway at the end of the county. So far, in fact, that a fire department from a neighboring county was first responding because they were closer. It was a rural area, heavily wooded, affectionately known as Methlehem to most of us. Meth heads, trailers with huge expanses of land for miles, old low country people that don't want to be bothered, that kind of stuff. We run a lot of calls in that area despite its sparse population. Mostly overdoses and psych calls, but today it would appear that someone's premium life subscription had expired. The CAD notes read as follows: 173105. Caller states found his cousin unresponsive in floor. States she is not breathing. 173109. CPR in progress. Coached by dispatch. 173112. Caller states to use front entrance, next to driveway. Driveway has blue Ford pickup parked. 173117. Caller states PT does not have a pulse. So, off we go. We make the long drive down the old winding back roads and arrive on scene. The house is just an absolute mess. Trash all over the yard, dogs barking loudly from the fence, the oh-so-recognizable smell of piss and mold coming from the open front door. Fire is already walking outside from the house, shaking their heads. My partner and I walk in, expecting the worst, and pretty much find it. Surrounded by what I assume was her family, on the filthy carpet of what I assume was the living room floor, was the body of the cousin, pale and in full rigor mortis. For those who don't know, which I assume is few if you're on this sub, rigor mortis is a state in which the body somewhat freezes in place, usually several hours after death, due to naturally occurring chemical processes in the body. This, unfortunately, means the patient is far beyond saving, and no amount of CPR would change that. Protocol states that in these situations, we take the family aside and calmly but directly let them know that their family member is deceased. Being the softer crew member between my salty paramedic partner and myself, I automatically elect to do this. I pull who I assume to be the caller aside and attempt to tell him that there's nothing we can do. He doesn't like this. Family members getting angry with us during times of tragedy is common. I've been in multiple situations where grieving family members need an outlet, and the nice EMT man looks just enough like a punching bag. This dude pulls a gun. So I'm standing there looking at the gun, and I look at him, and he says, cold as ice, "You're gonna fucking step over there, and you're gonna fucking fix her. Do you understand?" I nod my head, silently pressing the emergency button on my radio to get law enforcement on the way. Yeah, man, there's always a chance. Let me do what I can. I subtly make eye contact with the firefighters outside, who immediately also contact law enforcement after following my eyes to the gun. I proceed to do what the man says because what else do you do, you know? So I look at my partner, nod, and we begin to do CPR on this corpse. And her eyes just fucking shoot open. Like, we're doing CPR, admittedly half-assed Hollywood style, so this poor lady's cousin doesn't make the incoming coroner even busier with two more bodies. And this lady is dead. I mean, DED, dead, double dead. We don't withhold CPR if there's even a snowball's chance you might still be kicking, and this lady was just gone. We're through our second round when I hear the sirens. I look away, look back to my patient, and her eyes are just wide open. They were closed before. Her mouth was open, and her eyes were closed. Now her mouth was closed tightly, and her eyes were wide open, bloodshot, and staring straight at the ceiling above her. Her pupils, of course, were fixed and dilated. It was eerie. I've seen lots of dead folks before, but this just shook me for some reason. I stumbled. The guy behind us shakes his pistol, sobbing, and demands to know why I stopped. So, I continued. To make a long part of the story short, law arrived, got the dude to put his gun down, and arrested him. We, of course, discontinued CPR, and I had convinced myself that it has been a figment of my imagination, that her face was like that when we started. We'd packed up our gear and were preparing to give the coroner a report when we walked past the guy who had pulled the gun, in handcuffs, sitting next to a police car. He looked up at me, and typing out what he said next still gives me chills. "She ain't gone, you know." I looked at him curiously and asked him to repeat himself. "I'm sorry, sir. What was that?" The rest of the man's family looked on in silence from the porch. "I said she ain't gone," the man continued. "She ain't ever been gone and ain't ever gonna be gone, and you quit working on her. She ain't here because of you, but she ain't gone. She's with you now." I started at the man, taking more pity on him than anything, as he continued. "She's gonna follow you. I done talked to her. She's following your sorry ass home, and she's gonna watch you and make sure you never forget that you stopped working on her. She gonna follow you. She following you now, you sorry son of a bitch. She's following you now. She's following you now. She's following you now." The man starts yelling, and the responding officer comes over to throw him into the back of the car. The man just grinned as the back door of the patrol car shut. Something about it was sinister. Sinister on a level I've rarely seen, and I'll admit, although it was just the unstable ramblings of a man grieving the loss of a family member, it gave me chills. I looked back at the man's family, and they were all just staring at me, as if this was somehow my fault. We eventually cleared the scene. I felt an eerie sense of doom following us, but I honestly just credited that to the multiple disturbing factors of the call, from the state of the house to the dead patient and her charming family members. The rest of the day went by with few remarkable incidents. A few more granny falls at the nursing homes, a kid with what was essentially a bad paper cut, you get the idea. I couldn't shake that call from earlier, and the look on that man's face as he said what he said. I especially couldn't forget the patient's eyes. Her wide, open, dead, bloodshot eyes. They still haunt me. I got off late that night, which had become annoyingly typical at that time. I was getting ready for bed. I had fed the cat and was getting ready for a hot shower. The steam built up and I stepped in, enjoying the scorching hot and just sort of coming down from the day. I grabbed my shampoo, lathered up, and went to rinse. The soap blurred my vision, and that to this day is the story I stick with. As I go to rinse the shampoo off, my eyes are kinda doing that thing where you squint them closed to keep shampoo from running in them. You know the thing. I can see my feet, and when I look slightly forward, my heart jumps into my chest. In front of my feet appears to be another pair of feet, bluish in color. I practically leap out of the shower, wildly throwing my fists out in front of me and simultaneously trying to clear my vision. When I get the soap out enough, I see nothing. Nothing, of course, except my now torn-down shower curtain, very wet floor, and my extremely confused cat looking at me with more judgment than a cat has business casting. Long day, I say, and I just proceed to dry myself off and call it an evening. Ghosts aren't real. The feet weren't real. None of that was real, I tell myself. It's what you do, realistically, when confronted with stuff like that. We always yell at the person in the movies and say stuff like, "Yes, it was real. You just saw that. Run." Except when it's just you and you're all alone, your brain will try to rationalize away stuff like that. You'll tell yourself the cliches, talk aloud to yourself about how it was just your mind playing tricks on you. So I go to bed. I always sleep with a box fan right next to my bed. Box fans keep me from silence, which I absolutely can't stand to sleep in. Sometimes it makes funky sounds and I just ignore it, because a few clicks or dings here and there is better than trying to sleep with no background noise. That night, it had been particularly noisy. It just kept clicking over and over again. Click, 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 click. Eventually, exhausted, at this point it was nearly midnight, I rolled over to turn the fan to a different setting. I hoped that jostling it would maybe make the sound stop. When I roll over, I am face to face with someone. Someone is crouched down at my bedside staring at me. It was mostly dark, and I didn't get too many details. Frazzled, long hair, pale skin, and most importantly, in whatever dim light was in the room, I could make out wide, bloodshot eyes just staring me down. Its mouth was wide open, and the clicking sound was coming from it. Click, 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 click. I jumped from the bed and rushed for the lights. Of course, it had disappeared as soon as the lights were on. I ran to the living room and then I just kinda stood there. I had to process what I had just witnessed. No signs of anyone in my house. Doors were still locked. Cat sleeping lazily on the couch, nothing out of the ordinary. I called a buddy of mine on night shift for the company. I knew I wasn't going to sleep that night, and I had the next day off anyway. We played Xbox until the early morning, and eventually I passed out around 10 a.m. Nothing ever happened after that, and it's been years. No odd occurrences at home, no more creepy shower feet. Thankfully, for the rest of these stories, the creepy happens at the scene, or at the station, and not my own home. But I will always have the image of those eyes, wide open and inches from my face. And even if it was a trauma response or a hallucination or whatever, I can't unhear that creepy clicking sound she made. And I jolt awake anytime my box fan sounds anything like it. Thank you all for reading. This is the first time I've told this story, and it'll admittedly be the first time I've told many of the stories I plan to tell in the future. Hope you all have a great night, and a word of advice. If you ever have to jump out of a shower, plan your landing spot ahead of time and do it safely. I almost slipped and fell. Until next time, stay safe out there. I'm an EMT and something is strange about our station. In the emergency medical services field, you learn to accept that you're going to deal with strange/sad/horrific/scary/life-changing stuff eventually. Some people get it every shift. Some people may never get it. It's all very hit or miss, and the anxiety that comes with playing the what-if game can grind you down. But we get paid to be prepared for the worst, to know exactly what to do in extreme situations and to do the right thing at the right time. That's the cool part of the job. It's hard to know what to do when scary shit comes to the station, though, when it has always been the other way around. On my most recent shift at work, several odd events occurred, all at our station. I'm going to list them in chronological order, times approximated, along with some other details to give you context or to clarify locations and such. February 19th, 18:30 hours. I arrived to the ambulance station and clocked in. Our station sits across the street from the county detention center and is a building of rectangular shape comprising a triple bay with 3 sliding garage-style doors where our 3 ambulances, 2 vans and 1 box, are parked. The bay takes up approximately 3/4 of the building, with the final quarter being the crew kitchen, office, and sleeping areas. February 19th, 1900 hours. Moved my stuff into room 3 in the crew sleeping area. There are 4 rooms, with 2 beds each in them. We normally sleep 1 to a room, but bunk with 2 to a room if there are overlapping crews or we're overstaffed for some reason. We are never overstaffed. Rooms 1, 2, and 3 are on a single hallway leading from the back door to the living kitchen area. Room 4 is referred to as the dungeon and is on the opposite side of the hallway, across from room 3. It gained its nickname because a short retaining wall next to the door blocks out all ambient light from the hall. It gets dark as shit in there. February 19th, 2300 hours. Caught a call for a transfer from a local hospital to a nursing home 40 minutes down the road in another town. Left the bay, hit the automatic garage door switch to close the bay door, watched as it closed, and then headed out to the call. February 20th, 0045 hours. Returned to station to find bay 3-door open even though I watched it close before leaving the lot to take the call. Backed truck 264 into the bay, shut the door, watched it close again, and then restocked the truck and went to bed. February 20th, 0230 hours. Woke up from light sleep and had the distinct sensation that something was moving in the corner of the room. There is a curtain covering a permanently closed-off doorway in this corner, but there was no breeze or source of airflow to move the curtain. I got the feeling that something was behind the curtain, between it and the permanently closed door separating room 3 from room 2. Pulled my phone flashlight up and swept that end of the room. Of course there was nothing. I put on a YouTube video and stuck my phone under my pillow and went back to sleep. February 20th, 0450 hours. Woke up and had to pee. Walked to the living area and noticed the door to the ambulance bay was open. Shrugged it off because Doc is usually up around 0500 to work out because he's a maniac. Went to the bathroom and then back to sleep. February 20th, 0745 hours. Got up for the day and made coffee before the other guys got up. Sat in the kitchen making fun of each other for a few minutes before someone asked, "Where's Doc?" I went and looked in the ambulance bay, and it was completely pitch black. Every light was turned off. We never turn the lights off in the bay in case someone needs to sneak out and go smoke, or if we get a late call. Now everything was turned off, and it was pretty obvious Doc wasn't in there lifting or on the treadmill. February 20th, 0830 hours. Doc came out of his room, room 2, sweating. Jeff asked if he'd been watching Cops. That got a laugh out of everyone except Doc. Doc is black, but he looked about as white as he could be at the moment. Dude looked like he was either going to puke or scream. Maybe both. He said he'd slept in that morning instead of working out and had been laying in his bed under the covers, just kind of enjoying it, when he suddenly couldn't move anymore. He tried to kick his covers off, but said it felt like someone was sitting on the edge of the bed holding them down. He said he tried to call out for help, but felt the pressure on the edge of the bed transition to directly on top of him, and at that point, he couldn't speak or really even breathe. Doc is 6 feet 2 inches and an Army combat engineer who I have seen regularly bench 350 pounds and deadlift twice that amount. I did not mention to him the strange feeling I'd had earlier that morning in my room, right next to his. February 20th, 1200 hours. Caught another transfer call going from the central part of the state, back the other way, and into a whole other state. All told, it would be like a 7-hour transfer. Fun. And my Pizza Hut had literally just gotten there too. Figures. February 20th, 2030 hours. Got back to the station after the long call. Truck 262 was out on another call. I drove the whole trip, so I was pretty beat and went to bed early. February 21st, 0300 hours. Woke up to the unmistakable sound of Randy's Mustang starting up outside. She must have been parked right on the other side of the wall from my room. Walked out in the living area to see why she was starting her car to leave early, and noticed all the lights were off. I flipped on the kitchen light and then opened the door to the ambulance bay. 262 still wasn't back, and that was Randy's rig, so she definitely hadn't started the car. February 21st, 0500 hours. Still dark outside. I was sitting in the living area watching Planet Earth on the big TV because I couldn't go back to sleep, and my room still felt creepy. Heard a knock on the office door at the front of the building. Got up, poked my head through the door between crew area and office and looked out the front plate glass windows to see who needed in. There was nobody there. At that point, I heard one of the bay doors open, so I hopped over to the door between the crew area and the bay and flung it open. Lights were off again in the big room, and Bay 2's door was open. The only light was coming from Truck 263, our busted-ass backup truck, sitting in the far corner of Bay 3. Its primary light bar on the front of the box was on, and the passenger side door was open. The distance from the crew area door to the corner of Bay 3 is like 100 yards, and my eyesight is for shit. But I had the very odd feeling that there was someone sitting in the cab of 263. Everyone in the station was still asleep and in their rooms but me, and nobody else was coming in that morning for shift change. The rest of the shift passed pretty much uneventfully. We stayed busy and ran more calls, and I made it a point to stay out of the ambulance bay unless someone was with me. If you'd like to wager a guess or give any input on what you think all of this is, please be my guest. From the circumventive questions I've asked the guys and our manager, there has never been an accident with any of our ambulances, nor have there ever been any employees who died at the station or even died on duty at all in the entire company. The incident with Doc was not discussed further after that breakfast conversation, and so far as I know, nobody else has reported anything like what I saw or what he experienced. I am an EMT. This call still haunts me. We'd gotten the call to head out one evening, multiple in fact, about a man falling at a front yard barbecue, seemingly losing his breath and passing out on scene. Knowing how dire the situation could be, we ran to the ambulance and sped down the road to the house, arriving 5 minutes later to a scene of frenzied spectators and the man's wife crying as she sat on the ground next to him. It's quite amazing the level of detail the brain picks up during traumatic times. You may take notice of the strange rocks that litter the ground, the way the grass sways in the mid-afternoon breeze, or the clothes of an onlooker. When Harold Williams died, I noticed the way the sun was casting its final rays across the open street, warming the backs of the spectators as we performed our inspection of him, ensuring he was dead and not in a state of arrhythmia. I noticed the pale blue of his lips as they blended slowly into the ever-paling and ever-cooling white of his face, a few shades softer than the piercing blue of his eyes. Suffocation, no doubt. Although the noises of the world were blurred to me, I noticed his wife wailing her final remorseful goodbyes, screaming it wasn't fair, that there were signs of anything. He simply dropped. Her tears traced down her elegant, smooth face, dripping onto both her baby blue dress and the dark asphalt below. I noticed the other EMTs moving to the ambulance to grab the heavy black body bag. That would be the first case for Harold's now deceased body. Their movement slow and deliberate as they carried themselves, losing themselves in the tasks so as to not think about the life we'd lost on this night. I noticed police moving onto the scene, anxious to begin their questioning while witnesses still lingered and the body was still fresh. They moved with purpose. Their forensic counterparts moved slowly, their eyes scrutinizing every detail of the scene as though it would give them a better answer than anyone present could. I knelt over Harold and was moving my hand slowly, up to his eyes, eager to close them so they could no longer look unfocused into the orange sky above. My eyes caught movement, however, the flickering movement of his tongue in his mouth. A remnant muscle spasm or something else. My hand stopped as it moved again. I moved my hand over to his mouth and pulled it open with my thumb and forefinger. There was nothing there, yet the tongue moved yet again. Using my other hand, I grabbed the tip of his tongue and moved it up towards the roof of his mouth. A gasp escaped as something gave way, and I realized why his tongue had been moving. The gasp turned into a scream as thousands of spiders flowed out of his throat and onto the street surrounding us. I heard screams from the spectators and a horrified wail from his wife. I scampered to my feet, fear clutching my heart as I stared in abject horror at the scene unfolding in front of me. The spiders continued in their stream from the man's mouth, flowing on the ground around him. They moved as a solid mass. By now, spectators were screaming as they ran, and his poor wife was backing up slowly, still crying as she watched the arachnids flee from their host. They were large by standard means, not as large as tarantulas, but not as small as a common house spider. They had shiny black bodies that shimmered in the light and had an oily texture. Nausea rose in my throat and I could feel the bile beginning to rise. I threw up several times before my fellow EMTs were able to calm me down. But they weren't close when it started. They didn't see the way that the spiders pulled out his tongue as they ran. They didn't see how some of them were covered in blood and viscera, as if they'd been digging through his body to escape. They didn't see his abdomen sinking as they flew out of his mouth. The rest of the day kind of blurred by. My mind was unable to get over the scene I'd witnessed, and the fear had still clutched in my chest. It's by far the strangest call I'd ever received, and I never got any answers about it. A lot of times you don't hear about if your patient made it or not. You drop them off and away you go. With deaths, it's even fewer. They go to the morgue, and you don't hear about the autopsies. Looking back now, the familiar question enters my mind once more. How did they get there? I am an EMT. Some of my patients are dealing with things other than their diagnosis. I'm the only one who can tell. Hi there. My name is Jack Davis. I'm an EMT. Sometimes I take shifts on chair car duty. I can see things that other people cannot see. They are real. They are not hallucinations. They can hurt people. I've seen it happen. I mentioned that I do chair car duty, right? As an EMT, most of your day is spent taxiing old folks who either can't walk or are on oxygen back and forth from their dialysis appointments. Things like car accidents and ODS do come up. The real emergencies. But the majority of your day is spent transporting people to and from scheduled treatment. On chair car duty, it's all scheduled treatment. The patients are a bit more ambulatory and only need a wheelchair instead of a stretcher, but there's no emergencies, so you'd think it'd be less stressful, less anxiety-inducing. You'd be wrong. As an EMT, you get a partner. On chair car duty, you're on your own. For me, that's a problem, because sometimes the things I see affect my patients. Very often they lead into a misdiagnosis. When I have a partner, I can usually offload certain things to someone who sees, well, the same version of reality everyone else sees. When I'm alone, I'm mostly fucked. Once I had to run chair car for a routine checkup on a blind dementia patient. Small nursing home along the south coast of Massachusetts. I had been there before. I knew some patients had some, well, extra things bothering them that weren't exactly listed on their face sheets. I didn't know about this guy, though. Dispatch told me the patient had their own chair, so all I had to do was walk in, grab the patient's information, get the nurses to sign their life away to me, load them into the truck and leave. I got all the paperwork crap squared away relatively quickly. After that, the nurse walked me into their room. I still haven't found a good way to internally handle these kinds of things. It's hard, even when you have a partner to work with. Near impossible when you're alone. The patient had a single room. When I walked in, there were clearly two figures. One was the patient, half asleep in his wheelchair. The other, on first glance, looked like a small child, maybe early elementary school. He sat in the corner, the shadows hiding him. Thank fuck I didn't get a clear look at him when I first walked in. The little fucker instantly began stirring, slowly slinking its way towards the patient. As he got closer and got himself into the light a bit more, I knew I was on what would be one of the shittier calls of the day. The first thing I noticed was his skin. Dark brown, painfully tight, and deeply wrinkled. It was stretched taut over his skinny body. It looked rotten and old, like Slim Jims left out to bake in the sun. As it moved, I noticed that this kid-sized gremlin had some freakishly long arms, with proportions that got bigger the farther they were from his body. They ended in large but grotesquely skinny hands. It worked its way over to the patient's chair, and I got to see some more of this little Slim Jim brat's quirks. It had no features on its head, just a blank, wrinkly hunk of flesh sprouting between its shoulders. I didn't have to wonder how it saw where it was going or heard us coming in or any of that. I saw its hands. On the back of each hand was an ear. On the palm of each hand was a mouth. On the tip of each finger was an eyeball. It climbed up the back of the patient's wheelchair, rested a foot on the back end of each of the armrests, and curled its hands around the patient's head. It held a mouth over each of the patient's ears and a finger over each of his eyes. The nurse bent down and told the patient his ride was here. "Is Sharon coming?" The patient responded, clearly sounding like he was caught a bit off guard by having to go to the doctor's right now. The nurse thought for a moment. "Yes, Sharon will come with you, dear," were the words she chose to comfort him with. "It's time to go now, dearie," the mouths on the inside of the Slim Jim Brat's hand said in the soft voice of a kind old lady. It sprayed its disgusting spittle into the ear canals of the patient. Sharon is here perfect," said the patient, a bit calmer now. I knew Sharon was not currently listed as immediate living family or as an emergency contact on the patient's chart. It did not take much intuition or experience with dementia patients to know that Sharon was dead. It did not take much intuition or experience with the supernatural to know that thing was mimicking her voice. I walked around to the back of the patient's chair, taking care not to acknowledge the weird, misshapen meat baby spider-monkeyed on the back of it. It didn't matter. It reached its thumbs backwards, and the eyes on them stared directly into mine. I looked down into them like an idiot. It knew that I knew. And now, it knew that I knew. And I was about to be in a chair car along with the patient and this thing for about a 30-minute ride. This is why I like having a partner. I loaded the patient and strapped down his chair without incident. The ride there was quiet for the most part, until we arrived. I pulled the truck over to the front of the building, put it in park, pulled the e-brake, and was about to radio into dispatch to update my status when, "I'm proud of you," I heard from behind me in my father's voice. I glanced in the rearview mirror, knowing what I was about to see. The thing had lifted one hand and faced its palm-mouth-hand thing towards me. The mouth was shaped into a big, smug grin, stretching from pinky knuckle to thumb joint. Right as it saw that I had turned to see it, it gave a small wave, as if to confirm I saw it. "Yeah, I saw you, asshole. I love getting to see what you've become," the mouth said again in my father's voice. "My dad died when I was 4. My memories of him are mostly foggy. If you pressed me, prior to this, I wouldn't have been able to recall his voice. But when that thing opened, its mouth, I knew. Without a shadow of a doubt, I knew that I had just heard my father's voice. I played it cool. I had to. I have done this shit before, and I have seen scarier, more unsettling shit before this. Unloading the patient and bringing him into the doctor's office went off without a hitch. I had the staff there sign their lives away, and I was good to leave. Of course, it can never be that easy. Right as I turned to leave the doctor's office, I heard my mom's voice. "We'll see you soon," it said. I didn't need to look back to know where it came from. Sharon had been dead. My dad was dead. My mother, as far as I knew, was still alive. I held my shit together on the walk back to the truck. When I got there, I filled out the required post-drop-off paperwork while bawling my eyes out. I did not care that the lady who files it back at base would receive some wet papers. That was not really on my mind. When I had finished the paperwork, I calmed down. I called my mom. She picked up and sounded alive, as far as I could tell. I reassured her that nothing was wrong, everything was okay, that I loved her, and that I just wanted to hear her voice. She was fine with this. I finished my call, and then called into dispatch. I let them know that the patient was dropped off fine, and that I was ready to take another call. I didn't know what my next call would entail. I never do. I am an EMT for a camp, and the things I've seen are unexplainable. From the title, I'm sure it's easy to gather that I'm an EMT for a summer camp. It's a pretty sweet deal, actually. I started working here in July. My day pretty much consists of sitting in an air-conditioned office with one other person present and my computer to my face. Now, as you can imagine, what I do all day is take care of any little campers that gallop in with any sort of injury or illness. Again, pretty basic stuff. The little campers are all a delight. They range from age 3 to age 12, making it a pretty young group. There are campers whom I mark as frequent flyers, as well as little ones whose face rings absolutely no bells in my brain. The camp counselors are also great as well, all very warm that never cease to greet me with a smile. I really do like everyone there. I tend to work a 7-hour day, so you can imagine streaming the web makes the day go by pretty fast. Since the building I work in is normally a school, there is obviously bathrooms, classrooms, hallways, etc. I'm so used to the building I never really blink an eye, although there is something off about the place. The silence I deal with is always eerie. And I'm not talking about the silence when all of the campers are out doing their daily activities. I'm talking about the dead silence that creeps into the office and completely takes over. It's as if you're sitting in a soundproof box and the only thing you can hear is your own heart beating your blood through your body. I'm sure you must be thinking that I, being an EMT, must appreciate every moment of silence that I come in contact with, and with that statement, you are right. There's just something about this silence that's very off-putting, but I go about my day and try to ignore it as best as possible. The bathroom is right next door to the office, which obviously makes it easy access. So a Wednesday afternoon in mid-July, I stood up from my chair, stretched, and made a swift turn out of the office to use the bathroom. The noise of campers laughing and counselors talking echoed loudly in the background, and it pretty much occupied my ears. I walked into the bathroom and the door slammed behind me, not unusual considering the school was old and the door was heavy. But something was strange about the bathroom today. The door closed and all outside sounds came to an abrupt stop. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat. That same eerie silence that was normally present in the office had followed me to the bathroom. I shook it off, washed off my face, sighed, and looked up. What I saw next made me practically jump out of my own skin. In the mirror directly in front of me, I had seen my own face, and directly behind me stood a mangled man dressed in 1800s clothing. He appeared to stand at least 6 feet tall. The bottom of his jaw had appeared to have been ripped off in some sort of bloody battle, and his eyes were 2 black abysses. I stared at him for what was likely a full minute before he lifted his arm and pointed directly at me through the mirror. He was holding something in his left hand. What was it, you ask? I couldn't make it out, nor did I really want to. It made absolutely zero sense to me, and I wasn't about to sit there and try to defy it with logic. I turned around expecting to face this man, but turned to only see the door behind me. I shuddered and walked back to the office. My eyes must have been as wide as saucers, because when I returned to the office, the other person who was seated there also titled their head and looked at me as if I had 10. What's wrong, C? My family, friends, and coworkers call me C or M because it's easier than saying my first name. I stared blankly out the window. Yo, C, what's the matter? My coworker was growing concerned because I didn't answer. What? Nothing, I'm just, thinking or whatever. The look I was receiving from my coworker had gone from concerned to puzzled. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shoulder shrug and the continuation of work that was being done before. I didn't say anything because I didn't feel like risking looking like a crazy person. I've dealt with enough crazy people in my lifetime that it's something I'd like to steer completely clear of. I look at the clock and it says 12:30 in gigantic lettering. Fuck. My coworker turned around once more. What's up, Em? The face remained neutral at this time. Nothing, I just want to get the fuck out of here, I said, annoyed. I stared blankly into the eyes of my coworker for what felt like an eternity. I noticed something was off. The room grew completely silent. I could only hear my heartbeat. Hello? Am I losing my mind or something? My coworker looked concerned. Apparently, they had noticed the eerie silence as well. The temperature seemed to have dropped at least 20 degrees in the room. All of a sudden, a camper walked in with a bump to the head. I sighed as everything seemed to return to normal. I rolled over to the camper and asked what happened. She looked at me and said, "The man with the axe hit me." My stomach felt like it had fallen straight out of my ass. What? I felt the color drain out of my face. My coworker's expression confirmed my theory. "Sweets, there is no man with an axe. Only us and the counselors here. Don't be silly. An axe would have done a lot more damage." "No, I swear!" She stood up to reenact what occurred. Her voice grew louder. "I was in the basement getting ice to refill the color outside when this man approached me. He had no jaw or eyes, an axe in his hand, and he was like floating. He hit me on the head once with the other end, but I'm a big girl and I got away. I wanted to die right then and there." My coworker's face lost color as well. I was about ready to get up and leave. I stood up after taking care of the camper and explained that I was going to take a stroll downstairs. My coworker nodded, still white as a ghost. I began to walk down the basement stairs as I heard a scream coming from one of the empty classrooms. I ran down to see some counselors scaring the ever-living shit out of each other. I had heard that they've been playing this scare prank on each other. I didn't find it very funny. I heard a strange moaning coming from around the corner. Luckily, there was a desk in the hallway that I managed to hide behind. I held my breath as the spirit of the man passed by with the axe in his left hand. He looked around as if he was searching for something. I was thinking in my head possibly some answers. Moments later, I heard an obscure scream, the only way I can think to describe it, as it definitely wasn't of this world. Shortly after, I heard the sound of children laughing. Seriously, when is my shift over again? I checked to see if the coast was clear and proceeded to bolt up the stairs, only to be greeted by the man with the axe. He floated directly in front of my face with his finger out. He was so close to me it was almost as if I could feel his decomposed finger on my nose. I darted in the other direction and made it up the stairs in time, slammed the door, and stood leaned up against it until the banging stopped. I walked back to the office. My coworker sat there, arms crossed and head tilted to the right. "Kawima Evan, what the hell is going on?" I looked with dead eye contact and the world's most possible straightest face. I don't like when people call me by my full name. "Who is this Axeman creature?" "That's what's up." I scowled. "Seriously, don't call me by first name." My coworker's face immediately went pale. I found it slightly amusing, even though I shouldn't have. You've seen him too?" The mood in the room suddenly became uncomfortably serious. "Yes, that's why I just asked you." My coworker grabbed my arm and pulled me down in the seat. The laptop screen was opened quickly and we pulled up Google instantly. "Type it I looked over at my coworker. The words, "spirit of a jawless man that wanders with an axe," were typed before I could finish my sentence. We eyeballed the screen until we came across the article that would give us all of the answers. What history supposedly states is that a man around his 30s between 1886 and 1894 wandered his small village with an axe in his left hand and viciously murdered everyone he came in contact with. Reports claimed he roamed the streets, moaning in an almost zombie-like state. Well over 100 people went missing and turned up dead. We looked at each other in complete and utter shock. To make matters even worse, the building we were currently sitting in was directly where his house used to reside. I felt nauseous. We looked at each other again for a solid minute before slamming the computer shut and trying to continue with our day. Nothing else occurred that day. So our assumption is that he has some unfinished business that he's clearly searching the camp for. We have a few more weeks here. Wish us luck. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to post it. I am an EMT, and I think our patient is the devil. I'd like to start this post by saying I am not by any means an overly religious person. I do believe in heaven and hell. I do believe in God, and I do believe that we all go somewhere else in the end. I'm not, however, a Bible thumper or a every Sunday attendee. I go to church when my profession permits me the availability to go, but otherwise most of my Sundays are spent riding around in the ambulance. Not my first choice on how to spend my weekends, but hey, we all have to do what we have to do to keep the lights on and food on the table, right? Right. With that being said, I have been an EMT for a little over 15 years now, not all of which has been at my current station. I've moved around, gotten a taste of different stations in different states. You know, boredom keeps you migrating. My current station is near Homestead, Florida, near the Everglades National Park, out in the Panhandle south of Miami. Please, whatever you do, don't go looking for the person I'm about to tell you about if you live in the area. This is a warning for the local residents to stay away. In my career and travels, I have seen a lot of strange and bizarre accidents and injuries to the human body. Some true accidents, others acts of stupidity where the victim thought they could cheat death to impress some buddies. Newsflash, you cannot cheat death. Trust me, I know all too well. I've seen gunshot wounds, bodies impaled on various objects, limbs torn clean off. You name it, I've seen it. It has all pretty much muted my sympathy for stupidity and given me a gag reflex that would impress the toughest man. So, to say I'd thought I'd seen it all was an understatement. On the night of Saturday, July 20th, my partner Jim and I were sitting in the ambulance with our driver Ted. We had just left a Burger King out on East Palm Drive. We stopped to get our heart attacks on buns with a side of horrible indigestion and a blue raspberry icy. We were sitting in the ambo eating our food and talking, just trying to kill some time till a call came in. Mostly praying no calls came in and we could round out the rest of our night and get off on time. Jim and Ted were talking about what they were planning on doing on the off days. I was going over a mental checklist of all the projects I had to do around my house. We had been stopped for about an hour or so and had plenty of time to finish our meal and clean up our trash when dispatch came over the radio. Any available medics in the area. We have a 2D4 and a 2C1 with a 3B1 at redacted. Let me explain the codes and why that series worried the hell out of me. A 2D4 is a snake bite. I hate snakes. A 2C1 is a difficulty breathing or swallowing, so possible anaphylaxis or hemorrhaging setting in. And a 3B1 is a possible dangerous body area, which means the bite could be in a particularly sensitive area of the body, making the transmission of the poison or venom more potent and lethal. Or it could mean that the body is in a dangerous location like the snake or snakes are still in the vicinity, and doing our job could be life-threatening. Honestly, it shouldn't be that hard to distinguish between the two, but when you've been doing this as long as I have, you learn that dispatch's code delivery is not always the most reliable. Plan for the worst, but hope for the best. That's how I make it through the day. So Ted kicks the lights and sirens on. Jim and I hop into our chairs and we tear ass across town towards redacted. We leave the town proper behind us and get out en route, redacted. But quickly we notice we're the only emergency vehicle running. We don't see any other ambulances, no fire trucks, not even a police cruiser. We couldn't have been that close to the scene that we beat everyone else out here. Or we were so far behind that they're already on scene and we're late. But with our adrenaline pumping hard, we barely notice we're mostly alone on this stretch of highway with no backup to speak of. We pull up to the residence, and we're the first ones on scene. Ted calls into dispatch and informs them, Ambo 3381 arrived on scene, beginning assessment at this time. I don't remember hearing dispatch radio back a confirmation of our arrival. But once again, adrenaline was pumping hard. I was only focused on the scene and the victim. We get out of the ambulance. Jim and I are getting our med bag, gloves, and stretcher ready with backboard. Jim grabs a couple bottles of the most common anti-venom we have on hand, figuring it's going to be a cottonmouth or a rattlesnake bite. We start heading towards the house, and we're met at the porch by this older woman, a little portly, clearly the supposed victim's mother or grandmother. She starts shouting at us so fast we can barely discern what she's telling us. Jim has to physically grab her and shout at her, "Calm down!" before she slows enough to where we can hear what she's trying to tell us. She ends up confirming my initial thought that she is in fact our victim's grandmother. She tells us that her grandson was sent down to stay with her over the summer because his parents couldn't handle him. He was too much for them, so he was staying with her. She loved having him in the house because it broke up the monotony and gave her some company. Plus, he's her only grandchild. Jim shouts at her again, "Lady, we don't need your life story, just point us to him." She does, and we enter the house. Now I've been in some really sketchy places before. Drug houses, whorehouses, abandoned warehouses where people just magically got shot while being all alone and no gun in sight. Places that as soon as you enter the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you spend the whole time there scanning for threats because you know something or someone else is here in hiding, and you don't want to be victim number 2. When I say this house piqued my sketch radar, I mean it broke the needle slam the hell off and it left the building. From the outside, it looked like every other modest, single-family home on the block. Nothing weird at all. Even from the inside decor, everything seemed pretty standard. It was the feeling in the house that set me on edge, and I knew immediately that Jim felt it too, because he stopped dead in the middle of yelling at the poor old woman and looks at me and goes, "The fuck is up with this place?" Middle of July in southern Florida can get quite warm, to say the least. I believe the temp that night was somewhere in the neighborhood of 102 with 68% humidity. So obviously the woman had her AC on and cranked up. We could feel the breeze of the AC in the doorway to the house, and we could also see 3 ceiling fans from the front door, all on the highest setting. But as soon as we crossed the threshold into the house, it felt like 300 degrees. Jim and I look at each other, then back at the lady, and without saying a word to her, she says, "It's been like that all summer. I've had every AC man in town come look at my unit, and they all say there's nothing wrong with it." So Jim tells her, "You'd better get a home inspection done, 'cause no building should be this hot." We cross the living room and head towards the hallway where the boy's bedroom is. That's where his grandmother tells us he's at. Just as I get to the entrance to the hallway, I hear a whispering directly in my ear. Almost like someone was standing right next to me trying to tell me a secret. I turn to Jim and say, "What was that?" And he asks me, "What?" I told him someone was whispering in my ear. He asks me, "Well, what did they say?" I told him I don't know, 'cause I couldn't make it out. It almost didn't even sound like English or any real language at all. He just stares at me and says, "Man, this house is giving me the creeps," and I agreed with him. Something in here just wasn't right. We get down the hall and we're already sweating through our uniforms from the heat, and we open the bedroom door to the first room on the left. That was the grandson's room, according to the grandmother. We open it and see a little boy, maybe about 12 or 13 years old, a little on the small side, brown hair, tan complexion, with the most eerie, pale blue eyes you've ever seen in your life. It was like they could look into your soul. The boy was just sitting there on his bed staring at us. I look at Jim again because now I'm lost for words. This is the snake bite victim, right? This is the kid who's supposed to have a bite in a potentially life-threatening location? But this kid looked fine. In fact, he looked like he was having a great time. Smile on his face, creepy, pleasant look in his eyes. Jim asks the kid for his name. The kid responds, "Matthew." Jim says, "Okay, Matthew, I'm Jim, and this is my partner, Steve. We're here to help you. We've been told you got bit by a snake." Matthew stares at Jim, still smiling, and just nods. Jim then says, "Can you tell me what type of snake it was so I can give you the right anti-venom?" Matthew shakes his head. Jim goes, "Okay, you don't know what kind of snake it was. Can you at least show me the wound so we can treat it?" Matthew, smiling, says, "I know what kind of snake it was, but you don't have the anti-venom for it," and just points to his wrist. On it were about 9 puncture wounds, all of about snake fang thickness and depth, but they all looked like they came from a single bite rather than multiple bites. What the hell kind of a snake has almost a dozen fangs in its mouth? While I'm trying to figure all this out, Jim's moving closer to inspect the wound. He asks Matthew, "Why don't you think we have the anti-venom for this snake bite? Is it an exotic pet you don't want us to know about? We won't tell, we just want to get you the right treatment to help save your life." Matthew looks at Jim, then at me and says, "'Cause it wasn't a snake, I bit myself." Now I've heard it all. I've seen crackheads with knives sticking out of their backs who swore up and down that they fell on the knife and it ended up in them. I've seen junkies with needles in their arms still tell me they have never used drugs before. I've even had one man look me dead in the face and tell me he doesn't have any heart conditions, but as soon as I cut his shirt off, I can see the little square of the implanted defibrillator. But I've never had a snakebite victim tell me they bit themselves before. We play along and I ask Matthew, "So why did you bite yourself?" He tells us to build up my tolerance. Tolerance? Tolerance to what? Stupidity? I think to myself. Only those ding-dong snake handler religious nut jobs do that kind of goofy crap. Not a young child. Now I'm starting to worry about the boy's mental capacity, because if he believes he can build up a tolerance to snake venom by being bitten several times, then we're going to be coming out here again. I radio out to Ted in the AMBO and tell him we're going to be transporting one young male approximately 12 years of age with unknown snakebite wound to right forearm, and to get the route ready, we need to get to the closest hospital as soon as possible. He copies my transmission and says we'll take him to Redacted Hospital. I tell him 10:40 we're loading up now. I tap Jim on the shoulder and say, "Let's just move him. The longer we wait, the more time the venom has to work." He agrees, and we tell Matthew we're going to clean his wound here and lightly dress it in gauze to keep out anything we don't want in there. He just keeps on smiling at us in that creepy fashion but nods slightly. We clean his wound out and look for stray fangs that may have broke off, but find none. We lightly wrap his hand and wrist and ask him if he could walk. He nods, and we help him to his feet and escort him out the door and to the ambulance. We get him on the stretcher and toss a buckle around his waist just to keep him from bouncing around with Ted's driving. 'Cause Ted can be a little scary behind the wheel sometimes. We load Matthew into the AMBO and take off. Jim and I are in the back with Ted speeding towards Redacted Hospital, and we're taking vitals, checking his pupils, looking for skin pigment irregularities. But nothing looks wrong with this kid. His vitals were all normal. His temperature was 98.6. His skin looked good. I couldn't make heads or tails of this. About 1.5 miles from the hospital, Ted shouts from up front, "Damn, it's hot in here." Jim and I look at each other because we were dealing with it in the house, we never noticed it in the ambulance. But apparently, whatever made the house so damn hot followed us. We turned and looked at Matthew, and he looked back at us and smiled and said, "I like it warm." "The fuck does that mean?" said Jim. I looked at Jim, then back at Matthew and asked, "Are you making it hot?" Where Matthew responds, "Of course I can make it even hotter too, wanna see?" I quickly said, "No, we're good. Thanks anyway." Jim just stares at us like he can't believe his ears any more than I can believe mine. First, this kid claims he bit himself, and now he can control temperature around him. Who the fuck is this kid and where did he come from? I get more and more nervous every time this kid looks at me. It's something about those pale blue eyes. It's like he's evaluating the cleanliness of my soul for judgment. Ted is in the driver's seat with the AC on max and the windows open, almost hanging out of it, trying to cool off. I swore I heard Jim saying a quiet prayer. I holler up to Ted and ask him, "What's our ETA to Redacted Hospital?" He says we're not going there. They had a major power failure and were being rerouted up to Redacted General in Redacted. Great, that's over 45 minutes away. More time stuck in this sweat lodge with this creepy-ass kid. I tap on Jim and interrupt his personal prayer and say we're being redirected, and he swears under his breath. Apparently we're thinking the same thing. Matthew, however, just sits there smiling. The quiet tension wears on my nerves, and I end up breaking it by asking Matthew, "Okay, if you bit yourself, can you show me the fangs you used to do it?" His smile got even wider, and he says, "Sure, I'll show you." Right there, I wish to God I hadn't said anything. His jaw cracked and spread apart about 8 inches. His teeth began to grow and stretch and mutate into these fang-looking things. His smile got even more menacing as the transformation progressed. I began praying out loud at that moment, praying for God to look over us and watch out for us, 'cause we were definitely in the presence of evil. Jim just started shouting, and Ted up front hollers back, "What the hell's going on?" And Jim answers, "Exactly that. Hell." At that moment, our ambo dies, lights, motor, siren, everything. Complete darkness out en route, redacted in the middle of the freaking Everglades. Jim and I both bail the hell out the back door, and Jim yells to Ted, "Get the fuck out, you old bastard." Ted didn't need to be told twice as he came out the open window. From inside the abandoned ambo, we hear this horrible deep growling laughter, like something big is quite amused with itself. Then we hear a voice say, "If I wanted you all dead, you'd already be so." "You have nothing to fear from me. You're too far gone already." The hell did it say? You're too far gone already. What does that mean? We're all freaking out. I try my radio to call for backup from anyone. Heck, I'll take backup from the freaking Girl Scouts right about now. Just get someone out here to us, ASAP. My radio's dead. I turn to Jim. "Try your radio," he says. "Already did. Mine's dead." We turn to Ted, and he says, "Don't look at me. Mine's in the truck and I ain't going back in after it either." Well, shit. Here we are stuck in the middle of the Everglades with some kind of monster, a dead ambulance, dead radios, and can't call anyone for backup. What are we going to do? Right then, the lights and sirens on the ambo come back to life, and the motor starts back up. The three of us look to each other like, who's gonna go check it out first? Mutual consent was, none of us. Then we hear the voice again. "Don't worry, I'm finished with my game. You all bore me anyway." Then we hear a loud metal crunching sound and whole back of the ambulance shakes one good time and goes still. We stand there for what feels like an eternity trying to figure everything out before we realize our radios are working again. We hear dispatch calling us. 3381, what is your 20? Come in 3381. 3381, where are you guys? Holy shit, that's us. Our gear's working. Jim answers up, 3381, go ahead. Dispatch says, 3381, we've been calling you for hours. Where are y'all? Jim looks at me, then says, "We've been 10 to 6 on that snakebite call you sent us on out on Redacted Road." Dispatch says, "We never called in a snakebite. You guys went dark hours ago. We've got black and whites out looking for y'all." Ted and Jim and I just stare at each other. What did she mean they never sent us on a call? We all heard the call. We radioed in, we were on scene. We had the victim. We even radioed back where we were en route to. How could any of the things she was saying be true? Jim tells her our location and says to hurry up and get back up to us because we had a vehicle malfunction with a victim en route. She copies our transmission and says another ambo company would intercept us and take us to Redacted Hospital. Wait, wasn't Redacted Hospital rerouting us because of a power failure? Jim repeats this over the radio, and dispatch comes back, "No, there's no power failure at Redacted Hospital. What the hell is going on?" Jim and I turn to Ted and ask him, "Didn't you tell us that?" And he says, "Yeah, the hospital called out to me in transit and told me to reroute due to power failure." We're all standing on the side of the highway just beyond confused, not even realizing that the backup ambo company is almost to us. Trying to make heads or tails of this whole night has started to warp our sense of time and how much of it we had lost since starting this run. The other ambo company gets to us and sees our ambo lights and sirens going and motor running and stares at us like, "What's the problem?" We didn't have the energy to explain. We just said we had equipment failure and we were transporting a patient. They hop out of their truck and walk back the rear of ours, and before we yell stop, they snatch the doors open. Now mind you, in our confusion, we lost track of time. When they opened our truck, we all looked inside. It was completely empty, minus one severely mangled stretcher. They looked at us and just said, "How the hell did y'all manage to do that?" pointing at the stretcher. We couldn't answer them. We all told them it wasn't like that when we bailed out. Then they asked, "Where is this patient?" Again, we couldn't answer them. He was there also when we bailed the hell out. They looked at us like we were playing a joke on them and radioed to dispatch to 1022 that call, "No patient aboard Unit 3381. Dispatch copied and they left. Now we're all standing there on the side of Route Redacted, scratching our heads. The hell just happened? Where did the kid go? Whose voice was that we heard? And how in the hell could a kid bend up a stretcher that badly? We must have stood on the side of the highway for another hour at least until Ted says, "I don't know about you boys, but I want some damn answers." Not truly understanding what he means by that, we slowly climb back into the ambo and shut the doors. Ted turns us around and quickly Jim and I realize what he meant. He wants to go back to the house. We beg and plead with him not to, but he's pissed now. He doesn't take looking foolish very well, and he's going to get some answers for what we all know we experienced tonight. We pull back up to the house. It all looks the same, nothing here has changed. Ted jumps out and knocks on the door, and the same elderly woman answers the door. She greets us and asks how she can help. Ted asks her, "Why didn't you follow us to the hospital when we left with your grandson?" Looking very confused, the woman informs us that she doesn't have a grandson, that her only grandson died 8 years ago in a car crash. Ted says, "No, ma'am, we were just here a few hours ago, and we picked up your grandson Matthew. He was suffering from a snake bite, and we transported him away." She says again that would be impossible, because her grandson Matthew is buried out in Redacted Cemetery. Now this night is just getting stranger. We tell her we were there because she called 911 for help, that her grandson was bitten by a snake, and we took him. She tells us we were never there, and she hasn't called 911 for anything. We apologize for bothering her and left. Back in the ambulance, we're all trying to figure this out. How is it 3 grown-ass men could all imagine the exact same thing at the exact same time? And how did the stretcher get mangled? To this day, I still have no answers for that night. But I can tell you this much, Ted. Jim and myself are in church every single Sunday, and you can find us in the front row for both services. I didn't plan on working nights again. I'd done the overnight grind before at a warehouse and swore I'd never go back to it. But money has a way of killing whatever promises you make to yourself. I'd been laid off a month earlier. My savings weren't horrible, but they were disappearing faster than I thought they would. First the bills, then groceries, then a couple "I'll figure it out next week" charges. Rent was coming up and I didn't want to start calling family. I spent nights scrolling through job listings until everything blurred together. Then I clicked on one that felt off. No company name, no address, no details beyond. EMT, night shift, immediate start, good pay. Will train, that was it. The listed pay was way higher than anything I'd seen, and I wasn't in a position to be picky. I applied. They emailed me less than an hour later. They wanted to do a video interview the next afternoon. No paperwork, no prep instructions. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was excited, but because it felt like I'd clicked something I shouldn't have. Still, I needed the job. The call connected right on time. The man on screen looked like he belonged behind tinted glass, not in a Zoom call. Mid-40s, pale skin, no expression. He didn't introduce himself. "Confirm your name," he said. I did. "And you're physically able to lift and move a person if needed?" I said yes. He nodded once, like that wasn't the answer he wanted, but he'd take it. No questions about my certifications, no CPR, no experience. He looked off screen and read from something. "Do you follow instructions exactly as they're given?" "I try to. I need yes or no." "Yes." He clicked something on his keyboard. If someone told you not to speak to anyone at a scene unless they speak first, could you do that? I guess so. Not guess. Could you? Yes. Another click. If you were told to avoid verbally describing a patient while treating them, could you do that without hesitation? I don't understand what. Answer. Yes. He seemed satisfied, which made me more uncomfortable. What would you do if a partner told you to stop working on a patient and walk away? That depends on why. There will be a reason. Would you follow the instruction? If my partner said walk away, then yes, I would. He stared like he was digging for cracks. Last question. If you were told you may see someone who appears injured but is not assigned to you, would you leave them alone? That feels wrong. No one is asking how it feels. I'd follow the rule. He nodded. You'll start soon. You'll receive instructions by email. Do not share them. The call ended. I stared at my reflection, wondering what I'd just agreed to. I should have walked away. But I kept thinking about rent. They didn't give me an address until a few hours before the shift. It was a pin dropped onto a map, no business name, somewhere past the edge of town. The drive was quiet. Houses faded into trees, then nothing. No streetlights. I checked GPS twice to make sure it wasn't broken. Eventually, a low gray building appeared. Looked more like an auto shop than a medic base. Inside was bare, a short hallway, a metal table, a shitty coffee maker sitting on the counter, some lockers I didn't open. The lights hummed. One bulb flickered twice, then went out. No one bothered fixing it. A tall guy waved me over. Mid-30s maybe, EMS jacket with no name tag. You the new guy? He asked. I nodded. Paul, he said, I'll get you through tonight. His voice was calm but empty, like his brain was somewhere else. He gestured toward the coffee maker. If you're gonna drink any, do it now. Once we're out, no breaks. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's not. The coffee tasted burnt. He leaned against the counter. You drive here in your own car? Yeah. Good. Keep your keys in the same pocket all night. Odd advice, but whatever. You might get a call where the patient looks hurt, he said, but everything's quiet. If that happens, don't talk to them unless they speak first. I froze. That matched one of the interview questions. The hairs on my arms lifted. Why? It's safer. He didn't elaborate. He grabbed 2 radios. Never shout on these. If you need help, say my name and where you are. Nothing else, he handed me one. His hand was steady, but his eyes weren't. He watched me like he was waiting for me to panic. If something doesn't make sense, he said, do what I tell you. Think later, I nodded. He looked like he'd been through this too many times. We geared up and walked to the truck. Inside smelled like old smoke and antiseptic. A crooked taped dash cam stared out the window. You ride passenger tonight, he said. Watch. Don't talk too much. Fine by me. 20 minutes in, the radio crackled. Unit 4 respond. Old Quarry Road. Here we go, he muttered, starting the engine. Old Quarry Road barely counted as a road. Trees pressed in on both sides. Leaves scraped the truck as we crept along. Sometimes they come here, he said. They? He didn't answer. That didn't help. A car appeared ahead, hazard lights flashing. Slanted across the road like someone tried to turn around and failed. Passenger door open. No movement. Paul slowed and parked far back. Stay in the cab until I tell you. He got out first, flashlight pointed at the car. A woman stood beside it, holding her arm like it hurt. She didn't look scared, just waiting. Paul didn't approach her. He stayed near the truck and spoke low into his radio. The woman turned her head slightly toward us. Her eyes reflected the light weirdly, flat, like polished metal. I felt myself leaning forward without thinking. Paul raised his hand without looking at me. Stay where you are. I hadn't moved. He wasn't talking to me. The woman took a single step toward him. He backed up slowly. She didn't call in. he said under his breath. "We're leaving." He climbed in and reversed the truck. The woman didn't chase us. She just stared. Eventually, she disappeared behind the trees. We drove in silence for a while. "You'll learn to tell the difference," he said. "Difference between what?" He didn't answer. Back at the station, he tossed his radio onto the table and sat on the floor next to a locker. I sat across from him. "What was wrong with her?" I asked. "If you talk to them," he said, "they talk back. That's the problem." "That doesn't explain anything." He shrugged. "That's all I have." He didn't sound dismissive. He sounded like he was repeating something he'd been told and never questioned. I asked how long he'd worked there. "Couple years." "You like it?" "No." "Why stay?" He pointed at the radio. "It's gonna go off again soon." It did. "Unit 4 respond, same sector, marker 19. He stood fast. Soon we were back in the truck, moving deeper into the woods. No wind, no insects. Even the truck sounded quieter. We passed an old wooden stake with faded numbers, maybe 19. Hard to tell. Headlights washed over a man standing alone near the road. He lifted one arm, slow. Something dangled from his hand. Paul slowed but didn't stop. "Stay in the truck." He stepped out. He didn't look at the man directly. Instead, he looked around like he was checking the tree line. "You're hurt?" he called. No answer. He asked again. Still nothing. The man lowered his arm. Whatever he held hung from his fingers. Could have been clothing. Could have been something else. Paul glanced at me. "Don't get out." He walked toward the man slowly. The beam from the headlights stretched forward, then died into black. The man stepped backward, past the light, and vanished. Not quickly. He walked beyond the reach of the beam and didn't come out the other side. Like he'd stepped through a doorway that wasn't there. Paul followed him into the dark. I waited and waited. I thought about calling his name on the radio, but I remembered his warning, only say his name and where you are. I didn't know where he was. I didn't want something else answering. I got out, staying near the truck. "Paul?" I called quietly. No response. 2 steps forward was enough. The darkness felt like a wall. My stomach dropped. I backed up and got in the truck, hands shaking. I put it in gear and left. The station looked untouched when I got back. Lights still on, coffee still sitting, nothing moved. I left the truck where it belonged, grabbed my bag and walked out. Nobody stopped me. No calls. No emails. Except one when I checked later. Return assigned equipment by end of shift. That was it. No mention of Paul. I didn't sleep. I went online, searching for anything about Old Quarry Road. A couple old stories about missing hikers, nothing recent. The job listing was still up. Immediate start. I stayed with family the next night. Didn't tell them much. Just that the job wasn't what I expected. I keep thinking about how he walked forward without flinching. He didn't panic, didn't run. Almost like he knew. Maybe he'd seen it before. I don't know. I just know I made it home, and I'm not risking that again. If you see a posting for a night EMT job with no company name and no address until the last minute, stay away. If the interview questions sound wrong, they are. If you get assigned Old Quarry Road, don't go. There are people out there who look like they need help. If you don't know who called them in, keep your distance. I still think about whether I should have gone after him. Maybe that was the last thing he wanted. I don't know. I'm never going back.